There was this one night in the hospital when it was very touch and go with Tony. He came out of the coma for a minute and he said, "Who am I? Where am I going?" At the time, I didn't know what he meant. Coming here, I feel the same way. Isn't that odd? Let me get a picture.
Yes, let's get a picture indeed. Welcome, my friends, to Cut to Black, a Sopranos sit-down. My name is Jim Scampoli, and I've seen every episode of The Sopranos.
My name is Jacob Burrows, and I've seen 76 episodes of The Sopranos. Most recently is the 11th episode of Season 6, entitled Cold Stones. And obviously, we're talking about the cold stones you come face to face with in Paris, or are there other stones involved? We'll just have to discuss it and see, won't we? Who put this episode together, Jim?
I thought it was Cold Stone ice cream. Do you guys have Cold Stone ice cream?
No, that's why I thought it was statues. That makes a lot more sense now.
I don't think it was Cold Stone ice cream either, though. This one was written by Diane Froloff, Andrew Schneider, and, of course, David Chase, our Lord and Savior. Diane Froloff and Andrew Schneider, they did also previously work on the episodes Johnny Cakes and The Fleshy Part of the Thigh. I believe they're writing partners, maybe married, who knows. But they've worked on a bunch of other shows, Boardwalk Empire, Boss, Chicago Med. And then this episode was directed by Tim Van Patten, a Sopranos mainstay.
And this is the penultimate episode of Season 6 at Part 1, I suppose. I think so, at least, because I think there's 12 in the first pack here. Am I right?
Yeah, I believe you are correct. So, yeah, we do got one more in this batch of Season 6A or Season 6 Part 1, however you want to put it.
I'd say arguably it's got a leading up to the finale type vibe, though we have seen even more dramatic things happen in penultimate episodes of bygone days. But let's just get into it. Let's get started here. First part of the episode, Tony comes home and finds out that AJ's lost his job. And I feel like this is the most predictable thing that's ever happened on The Sopranos, but it also feels like I've seen this scene before. I think in my mind I'm confusing it with like when he's in the hospital and he's flunked out of school and all these other, like every scene with AJ almost is Carmela yelling at him, and it's such a good classic way to start.
Yes, yeah, and I don't mean to sidetrack it real quick, but I forget if I've brought this up on this show or not, but I don't like when people call it The Sopranos instead of The Sopranos. I just want to put that out there. So don't call it The Sopranos, okay? It's called The Sopranos, right? Am I right?
I think you're right. Did I call it The Sopranos?
Oh, no, not you. No, you say it correctly, but I just, for whatever reason, it popped in my head. I've heard people say like, oh, have you ever watched The Sopranos? Have you ever seen The Sopranos? And I don't even think on the show they say it that way. So, I mean, maybe they do if it's like some sort of Metagon trying to come in and think they know what's what. But I'm sorry, that's complete sidetrack. I just want to put it out there in case I hadn't before. But you are correct. I like that this scene just kind of drops in the middle, and because we're like Tony, because Tony's walking in. It's framed nice too, because Tony's in the background as he's just entering the house, and Carmela's already in the midst of yelling at AJ, and he's got a little sourpuss on his face. And yeah, to no one's surprise, he was fired from Blockbuster, but he also kept it a secret, I guess. He was pretending to go to work because she went in.
Which is that stereotype of like classic working class man loses his job and hides it from his wife, except he's just a piece of shit. And yeah, he was stealing stuff too and like selling cardboard stand-ups of Wallace and Gromit or some shit. Yeah. Also great and classic. And and he does his genuine weaseling that he always does, saying it's, I care about the environment. You want these things to just be thrown away? Way better to sell them on, right? Someone who will enjoy them. I agree. It is the Sopranos and it's vitamins, so we're all on board here. Yeah. And AJ's a piece of shit. There you go. And he starts talking. Sorry to cut you off. I was just gonna say he throws out that it's 500 bottles for 500 for a bottle of Cristal at the fancy clubs, and it's a 2-bottle minimum. But that's kind of a mistake, because they're like, "What? You spent 1,000?" And he's like, "What? No, not every night."
No, we switch off. Because I think Carmela mentions that she went to Blockbuster to rent Cinderella Man. And there's like a comedic little back and forth where she's like, do you know what I found out or something, and he's like, it's still a classic. And now she found out that AJ was fired, and it also is one of those double-edged swords for Tony and Carmela, because AJ, by selling off promo items like that, that's a very Tony Soprano move in a weird way. So you have to feel like a part of Tony would be maybe a little impressed that he's thinking like an entrepreneur, like a gangster. And yeah, I love that, because especially here in the States, there's a lot of discussion on income inequality and being paid a livable wage, and he almost has that argument where he's like, I can't live off what they pay me, but then he goes, his rationale is because how much VIP bottles at the club cost, Cristal, and there's 2 bottle minimum. And then it's great because when the scene ends, because like Tony kind of gives his thoughts too, and of course Tony's a bit more stern, and then as he walks away, AJ gives him the old flip off behind his back.
That's great. It is
perfect.
So this sort of continues in the next scene where Carmela's awake, Tony's asleep, but she kind of wants to talk about how there's something dead in him or whatever she says. It's kind of dramatic, but Tony just says he's spoiled, whatever, they fucked it up. But she says no. He grew up with loads of spoiled children, and most of them are in like Ivy League schools now, and he's got this fuck you in him. And then right as they're in the middle of this, Meadow comes in and reveals that she's moving to California.
Yeah.
And I love that Tony's like, but I thought you were having problems. And and she's like, I never said that.
Yeah, it's great because much like how AJ always does that too, where they bring up something he did and it's like, no, that's not what I said. But yeah, she's going to follow Finn to California because, they are having problems and they just make bad decisions all the time as far as their relationship's concerned. And yet another thing for poor Carmilla, because even though these kids are of age and somewhat out of the house, it's very TV situation the way they are back, but also it's very plausible as well because, even Meadow as a smart, capable woman, like they're still both a little spoiled. That's why she's always coming back and having like meals made for her and her laundry done. And I guess from what I've gleaned this episode, I don't know if they outright said it, like she's been living in the pool house, I imagine, like throughout this season.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
part
that.
of it is because Tony was going through some stuff. I mean, he almost died, and I'm sure there was help around the house, but then probably get back in that Arrested Development, getting used to having everything done for you, even when you're still trying to be a lawyer or whatever she's doing. But now we're getting into more like, I guess, empty nest. Maybe even not just empty nest, but just like Carm can't deal with this, and I kind of don't blame her.
Yeah, and Tony is he just wants to go to sleep throughout this scene, even with all these revelations. Interestingly, it's revealed that AJ is eavesdropping, and it doesn't seem that important. But then I guess maybe he heard the bits about himself, but I don't know. I can't really read if that's supposed to be the case. He's kind of there just when she's talking about whether Meadow's talking about if she's going to go to law school or medical school, and she can't decide, and he's kind of there listening outside. I feel like it doesn't really add much to see him listening in, other than I guess, despite his feigned indifference, he still wants to be kind of engaged with the family or something.
Yeah, and I guess you'd like to think that at least what he's picking up from it is that, like, oh, I got fired from Blockbuster and I can make these big speeches about how it's because of I have standards or principles or something. But I mean, Meadow is a glowing example of what a fuck up he is. And I'm sure he already does think of himself as a fuck up, even though he does get to hang out at the clubs and he gets whatever he wants. Like, even a piece of shit still feels like a piece of shit, and I think it's just a nice, opposite of like an opposite for him to see and, at least show a moment of insight like that. He kind of knows he's full of shit and he really has nothing going on. Yeah. Not that it really pays off anything here, but I don't know. I think it's just like a little character moment, at least if you want to have some hope for him as a person that maybe he can learn something from this, but we'll see.
Yeah. So we have Tony and Phil Leotardo having a little meeting in like a warehouse of some sort.
I think they're in a Costco.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, you don't get Costco's, bro. Like, look how great that is. Just, stacks and stacks of surplus product.
Yeah, I just watched one of them video essays with fun graphics telling you all about how Costco works and what it is and how it's different from Amazon. So I totally understand this, which is something I would not have gotten otherwise. I just like Costco, okay. Just looks like a big warehouse to me, but I guess that's how you psychologically entice people into thinking they're making bargains while the subscription fee is the real thing that keeps your business afloat. But what do I know, Jim?
Absolutely. Yes. So, yeah, and they're talking about
the vitamins.
Yes, they are. Yeah, it's come back up again, yet again, the vitamins.
Yes. But more importantly, they're talking about some no-show jobs, which we know by now what those are. I don't know which construction project it is, but either way, Johnny Sack is Phil Leotardo is like, who is the boss anyway? Yeah. So difficult to keep track of. What am I, an FBI agent? Can't even keep the family tree straight. So the no-show jobs are actual no-shows now at the moment, is what he's saying.
Yeah,
he's kind of putting a bit of pressure on Tony, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of is showing that, like, John was the best option as far as Tony's concerned. And even though it seemed like Phil and Tony had more of a friendly back and forth, now that Phil is essentially like the Tony role of being the boss while someone else is taking the heat for it, Phil's going to kind of show his disrespect for the New Jersey glorified crew by, he's squeezing them out some of the gigs here. And I mean, I'm sure there's like some legit stuff to what he's talking about, where it's like some of the, just in general, handing out the amount of jobs is less than it was. But of course, it just does show that Tony's not going to be a priority as far as Phil's concerned. And it's just another thing he's going to have to deal with.
Yeah. And another thing he has to deal with, continuing from before, is Carmilla coming in, talking about you never listen to what I say. I told you about Paris. We were talking about it right here. But he doesn't remember. But it's a silent auction, I guess, that she just paid for some trips to Paris she wasn't going to use, which sounds like a great med school type problem. Like, what the fuck?
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, so she says she thinks she should go. And I feel like Tony... I'm not sure Tony would have said yes if not for the earlier scenes, and I guess last week too, when he was all annoyed about everything she's doing. Like, is this for her benefit or for his own that he says you deserve this trip?
Yeah, and I think it's also like, I mean, this whole season's been about chipping away at Tony Soprano's new lease on life, about how every day's a gift, and how, we saw a couple episodes back that he had an opportunity to cheat on Carmilla and he didn't, and he was kind of mad at her for it. And I do think he does see it as a relief, something good for Carmilla. But I mean, as we see through the episode, he also gives him an opportunity to be up to his old antics. And I think that's what's so important about this episode, is like, I think we're finally, the world won. Tony is going to be back to Tony. And that's kind of what goes through this whole hour here.
Yeah. And it's even brought up, I think in like therapy or whatever, that like, or no, she even says it here. Carmilla says, like, you do whatever boys do when, their wives are out of town or whatever. And he's like, all right. But most important thing about this scene is the ending.
Yes.
When he calls her back to look at some footage of the Nazis marching into France. And she's kind of like, and the look on her face as she walks away is just genius. And it works so well because they always watch all the weird black and white stuff on the show. And he's just like, look, Paris, like, where you're going. And I think he genuinely means it as a positive thing. And she's like, all right.
It's so funny. He's like, oh, hey, speaking of the devil. And it's like, yeah, the Nazis marching through. And yeah, her reaction and the look on her face is so great. And I, going into this too, like, I haven't read the chapters on this episode in the Sopranos session, but I was reading some of the initial just season 6 breakdowns, like when they're talking to David Chase. And I think Carm's trip to Paris gets brought up a lot as like a negative thing, as like oh, why'd they do this? And I guess maybe in the realm of thinking like, oh shit, it's the episode before the finale. What's going to happen? And we spend this time with Carmilla and Ro in Paris. But I really liked it. I don't know if it's just because I've traveled internationally recently, but I related to a lot.
Ooh la la, Jim. Ooh la la. Continue.
I related to a lot of it, and I liked what it said about Carm's character. But I mean, I guess we'll get into that a bit more. But I was kind of surprised because going in, I was thinking like, oh yeah, this is kind of a thing people talk about as like shitty. But I thought it was very good.
I'm not surprised people say that, but I do disagree with them, and I agree with you, Jim. Because it kind of reminded me of the marvelous Mrs. Maisel. We did miss last week, but this is our contractual obligation to mention Amy Sherman Palladino in every episode.
Yes.
But in the marvelous Mrs. Maisel season 2, by the way, keep an eye on Maisel Men coming soon as we discuss season 3 coming up here of marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Anyway, they go to Paris is the thing, so that's how I connected it. But more importantly, they go to Paris, and it's like going on for episodes and episodes. And I was kind of thinking of other shows where you have one episode where you go to a place and the episode is all about that. And I could see if this whole episode was like the Paris episode, I get where you're coming from. It's a bit of an interruption. It might disturb the flow, but there's a lot of other stuff going on. And I think all the stuff with Carmilla and France, like you said, even though it's a bit hoity-toity la-di-da, it captures the feeling of going somewhere else. And especially when she later describes like seeing these places that have only like existed in pictures for her before. Like that was my experience going to New York, going to where The Sopranos is partially set, of seeing all of these buildings that I've seen blow up in a million films. And I'm like, oh, they're still here. It's like a weird thing. And it's full of people just living their lives. It's not a film just because I go to this other place. And we get to see some of that. And I think all of that is relevant. I mean, granted, it's France, not Italy, but it's still a lot about like the old world and the new world and like all these many, many years of people living here. And I find it all very relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. We have Tony just kind of hanging out. I don't know if it's at like a mall, a coffee shop or something. He's reading the paper, and then Vito shows up. And yeah, I guess going back to what you're talking about in the last episode, it is kind of like, dude, what are you doing, Vito? But I guess he kind of feels like he has a plan. Like he's going to get back in, but then be out of sight, out of mind. He's talking about being in Atlantic City or something. But it does seem like a very boneheaded move doing this. But I guess to him, he has no choice. He does point out that his brother's there, and I believe that's the guy we saw get cracked in the skull by Mustang Sally in that episode seasons ago, back in like I think season 3. When like
no memory of this at all, but okay.
Remember, it was the guy, he was arguing with his girlfriend, and then his girlfriend was like trying to get away and asked him like, can you give me a ride somewhere? And then he went into his car, took a pipe out and just smashed him in the head, and it was like a big thing. And then they got Bobby's father to do the hit, all that stuff. But yeah, that's that guy. So, and I do want to call that out because the actor that played Mustang Sally, who also, I mean, I know you already brought up Mrs. Maisel and Gilmore Girls, but he also was on both of those shows. He did pass away recently. So poor Salvatore Tail. Well, no, that's his actual character name. That's not his fucking. God damn it.
Such a heartfelt moment
My
there
fault.
from Jim.
Yeah, Jesus. No, Brian Tarantino. He did pass away recently, but he's a great character actor. I mean, even if you're not seeing his face right now as I'm describing it, if you Google him real quick, you'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen that guy in a bunch of stuff. And he's always good.
I see. Okay. Well, very good. I just thought we see Vito's brother, and he just looks like kind of a weird copy of Vito, but like a little bit more stupid. It's great.
He's bald. He's got a weird balding.
Yeah.
Makes him look dumber.
You gotta say Vito is pretty dumb on his own, though, because he's, like you said, he's got this plan, and his plan is to say that he was never gay. It was just the meds messing with his head.
Yes.
And to be fair, Tony doesn't want to deal with this shit. Tony doesn't give a shit. And Vito's smart enough to say, look, I know I can't work construction, but I could be out of sight, out of mind. Here's a bunch of money. I could get you more money. And so in a way, it makes sense, but he should know better. And Yeah, he just doesn't, and he just kind of hangs around. I'm like, what was the point of shooting that other guy when he's just gonna show up anyway? Like, he's keeping
True.
it secret, but he's basically just there. And I feel in retrospect, this is jumping ahead, but when he does get killed, I almost feel like it cheapens the moment where he kills the guy in the previous episode because it's kind of there for us to not feel bad for him, if that makes sense. It's in
Yeah,
a
no.
way, it's like, yeah, all these characters are pieces of shit, and we love showing that, but it's also like we throw in an extra murder just to make sure you're not too sympathetic to this guy, kind of giving us permission to be okay with the way he dies or something like that. I don't know. It was just, it all kind of does make sense, but I mean, it's such a boneheaded move from him.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I mean, that is kind of what I was saying before, is that it is a reminder that he's a piece of shit, but doesn't mean he deserves what he got. But I guess that's also kind of the point. It's like, it's almost like him killing that guy, but then if he just got shot in the head, you could like totally not feel bad for him. But I think as we see, because it's not like, it's like he gets killed, but the episode keeps going, and we see in a weird way that even like, besides it being an insult to the Soprano family, I don't think anyone there thought he deserved what he ended up getting. But we'll get there. We cut back to the they're at the Bing, and there went. I think Chris says that like he was stalking you, like Vito was stalking you, T.
Yeah, and Silvio's like, that's a thing with the gays. Living in the closet makes him devious.
They say something here about Richie Aprile, and that he disowned. Did they say like that he disowned his son? But I don't remember that being I remember it was like, wasn't he surprisingly progressive?
I don't remember.
Maybe it wasn't so much that they stated that Richie Aprile's son was gay, because remember we only saw him when he was dancing in the empty house. Because remember they had that scene. It opens on an episode, and then we see an empty, huge house, and then people are like ballroom dancing through it, and then we find out it's Richie's son. But I don't remember him being like that. Although I guess he did punch Janice for bringing it up, didn't he? So yeah, I guess he wasn't that progressive. He punched her in the face, I think, because she brought up something about his son.
Yeah, not super progressive there, punching his woman. I don't remember that either. I have to admit, I'm gonna have to do a Sopranos sit down myself and rewatch The Sopranos. It sounds like after we finish this.
Yeah, and I was actually talking about this recently, because keep in mind we've been living with like this whole, like, what has it been, like 2 years we've been doing the show or something crazy like
2 years, yeah.
And we've just been living with The Sopranos. Like, it's not like we've binged it and then gone back to be like, oh yeah, we got to discuss this episode. We've been just watching the episodes as we're about to discuss it. So I think it keeps it still fresh in our heads, but also like, yeah, that was, a year ago when we watched that one, and so much has happened since then. So maybe some of the specifics get washed away a little bit.
I think it's legitimately more than a year ago, and I think if you're watching a show live, you're also kind of like, moments stick out to you, obviously, but a lot of it becomes a bit of a blur, and that's why our podcast is so valuable for everyone at home, because you get to see the little moments and the big moments and how they relate and build to one another. God, we're great.
Yeah, we are.
But yeah, Richie disowned his son. It's a hilarious line because he's like, say what you will about him, but he did the right thing. He disowned his son.
Yeah. And yeah, Tony's just kind of annoyed because the situation's back. I mean, I guess he thought he was out. I forget Paulie's read here because he just kind of doesn't say anything and like walks away, but I don't remember like what he walks out on.
Yeah, I don't really remember either. I think maybe I thought of it as like him. I don't know, because I think Tony's like, fuck Phil, he only cares about his rep, and that's why he wants Vito gone, and that's when Phil leaves. So maybe Phil, I'm doing this a lot. Yeah, Paulie. Yeah. Paulie leaves, and I guess you could read it a bit like Paulie would usually fill that silence with something, but he's choosing not to do that, and the fact that he's not speaking out is kind of more worrying than if he's there yelling about what he thinks should happen, So maybe that's a read like a rumbling of like, if you let Vito go through with this, maybe there'll be an even bigger problem than you want there to be or whatever, because I don't think Paulie is very progressive.
Or maybe Paulie's getting a little piece of the Tony lease on life now that he's dealing with cancer and stuff like that, where it's not like, maybe he's not the most accepting of homosexuals, but he's kind of like, who gives a fuck at this point? I got cancer.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, Carmela's going on her trip. Tony gives her like a nice new like Louis bag or something, but it's got a bunch of cash in it, of course.
Mhm.
She even like does feel guilty that she's going on this trip, but Tony's encouraging her. She deserves this, and yeah, it's kind of a sweet moment. And of course, he has to give her lots of cash and money because that's part of what the relationship was based on.
Yeah, and like it's he gives her all this money, and then she reminds him of when he was in a coma, and she told him that she loves her,
Oh
and
yes,
so that's really sweet.
yep.
But but she's kind of having a real moment, and she's like, "I should tell you more often," and he's like, "Nobody's stopping you," and he just walks out.
And we have Vito with his family in New York. Which New York, not a great. I mean, I guess he's in like fucking. He's by Rockefeller Center. He's by 30 Rock. He's by the ice skating rink, so he is in public. But still, that's Phil's territory. But he's with his family, telling his kids that he's a spy working deep undercover. I mean, the fucking tales this guy comes up with. He's good on like on the fly, like coming up with a story, but they're always like insane stories.
Yeah, well, the CIA doesn't tell you when you need to go next, so it's just I'll be safe as long as you don't tell anyone where I am, and this won't fuck you up later. Don't worry. None of this is gonna be something you're gonna talk about with your Melfi later.
Yeah,
They swear to keep it secret.
yeah. And then what does Vito calls Jim? Well, first he talks to his wife. They're still at the rink.
Yeah, and she wants him to do the therapy or whatever to get over this thing, and he says, "Oh, I was never gay. I hit my medicine, whatever." And then he goes and calls Johnny Cakes.
Yeah. And then Johnny Cakes is just kind of like, yeah, no, you're a piece of shit. you can't live without the life, which is true, and basically ends with, hey, I don't want to hear your voice. Don't ever call me.
Yeah, it just kind of feels like even committing to this terrible plan, he still needs to call. Like he can't live without the mob life, but now he also can't live without his love, Johnny Cakes. Like, make up your mind one way or another, even if it's a stupid thing. It's like I didn't see anything to incite him calling Johnny Cakes. I guess maybe his wife asking about the therapy is the thing that makes him call, but it just kind of feels like, where is he now? Is he in this motel room again? I guess.
Yeah.
So whatever.
We quick shot of Carmen Row. They're now in Paris, and I was almost half expecting them to have like a Pauly type experience, where you're all excited to go to a new country, and then it just kind of sours you on. You. Maybe it's because I was in France for a brief day, but I didn't like the people there. Typical American, not having fun. But yeah, that's just a quick thing. Kind of the old in the cab. Seeing the sights as you initially touch down. Then we have Vito in a grocery store meeting up with another guy who asks him to float him some money, 20,000 for what he's got child support or a divorce he's going through. And I guess to Vito, well, hey, I mean, it's like I'm back in business. But as we see, this is maybe just a genius. This is just a genius ploy, like understanding that, well, Vito's not going to be in the picture much longer. I should get some money from him because then I won't have to pay it back.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, who's this guy? This guy knows how to play the game. Let's make him a capo. Then we have another clandestine meeting by the Lou Costello statue, which we've seen before, and we thought it was like a rifle or whatever, but it's a baseball bat. And yeah, this whole scene is just Phil going like, "Look, he's back, and Tony's like, fuck you, and then they go their separate ways, basically.
Yeah, we're gonna take care of this Fanuc, and you just being Phil, and Tony doesn't want to hear about any of this shit. So yeah, the before it was just business dealings with the no-show jobs. Now Vito's back in the picture, so Phil and Tony are not on the best terms.
Yes, but this is enough at least because Tony's definitely considering it beforehand, and we have some scenes in France in between, but he does go later to just tell Silvio like it's off. Like, you gotta pick your battles with Phil, like, and he really wants this, and like, fuck it. And he expresses something that I think we all feel. It's like, why couldn't he just stay wherever the fuck he went? Like, now I have to do this. Fuck fuck it. But yeah, as it turns out, he doesn't have to do it.
Well, doesn't he also say like something like, why couldn't he have like done this in secret? And then Still's like, well, he wasn't he?
But better in secret, Jim.
Yeah, even better about it. Why couldn't I be a bumbling fool?
Yeah.
And yeah, the other scenes were just kind of like, Carmen Rowe, like, just they're like, we can smoke in a restaurant. Listen to the French language, and they're trying to understand I did go to Tokyo, and you have a lot of those moments where they're just speaking Japanese to you, and you're just like, oh yeah, you're just like nodding your head, and then you point at a picture because like I have no idea what the fuck you're saying, bro. All right.
Yeah. And I think I had the same thought as you, that they might like have a not great experience, because the first scene in the cab is like French hip hop's blaring. It's kind of desaturated out the window. You can't, like, it's not like in the pictures or whatever. But then as soon as they're in like the cafe or wherever, they're just like, oh, I love you can smoke here. We're wearing cool hats. And over here in French, going like, oh, I just love the sound of it. Who gives a shit what they're saying? So in general, they're talking about no one knows us here, and Carmela does speak French a little bit, but she doesn't do it. And then they are having this moment of like running around trying to get to things, which I think happens to most people on a holiday somewhere new. And like I said, it captures a lot of the things you experience if you travel really well. But like she's running around looking in nose in a guidebook, and then like stops and like, oh my God, and just looks around and like is surrounded by all this art and all this super French shit. So they have a real moment there.
Yeah, it's a really nice moment because, they're like, we're going the wrong way. Where's the Eiffel Tower? And then you just have that, okay, stop, look around. Okay, we're here. We don't have to rush to this location. It's all here. It's right here. It's right where we are. So yeah, I like that moment a lot.
I have to call out that they say like, all the guidebooks say you should set your clocks to the local time. And I'm like, you need to put that in a guidebook? Like, because like the sun and all that's going to set at different times. Like, change your time, change your clock.
And then, then we had the scene like we talked about with at the Bing with Tony and Silvio about, Vito has to go. And this is to me, between this and then Tony getting roadhead from a stripper behind Carmela's back, this is like kind of the great return. It's not that Tony Soprano went away. He was still kind of there, but there was maybe going to be some differences there. But now he's back. Like there's not going to be that much difference. You face a near-death experience. You like to think that you're going to come out of it as a different person, but life brings you back down. You can't just change everything. What are you going to not work at the Bing anymore? What are you not going to be surrounded by strippers all the time?
Yeah. And he's just dealing with the stress and the ways he knows. Speaking of stress, Phil, we get to see Phil and his wife. And this scene is interesting for a couple of reasons, because it kind of makes it seem like Phil's wife is the one who actually pushes for this and cares about it, and Phil doesn't care about it as much, which is hilarious because we've just seen his anger for so long, and then we see how he's just annoyed by his wife. And I also, in retrospect, I'm like, is he asking about the slacks because he knows he's going to have to wear them to the funeral? Like, is that what he's doing? Because he's really upset about these slacks, Jim.
That's true. I didn't even make that connection, but I think you could be onto something there. And because what she's talking about, like kind of the Bible and these people, and it's fun to see him almost indifferent, but just being like nagged enough a little bit where like that's where his anger is coming from. And I guess, I mean, we could get to it a little bit. I mean, he does literally come out of a closet in the scene. He does talk about how he's been in the prison he was in prison for 20 years. He does like squeeze the bed a little bit. And so in that respect, what she's saying about homosexuals here, he's taking that in about himself, because you can assume he definitely partook, because even Tony had said in an earlier episode that that's kind of not frowned upon, or that's kind of like there's an understanding there because you're doing time in the can for so long. So
yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point that I didn't think of at all. But yeah, but you get a free pass, Jim. You get a free pass. Everyone knows that.
That's
There's no
true.
moving
Yeah,
around.
yeah, you get a prison pass, so it
Yeah.
works out.
Well, I guess it's got to be yeah when you come out and talk about how anyone who does this is damned, etc., etc. That actually makes a lot of sense now that you speak of it. And yeah, speaking of being damned, we move to a French church. Carmela's sort of watching some children get taught in French and looking up again loads of statues, like I said, cold stone statues, what have you.
Yes.
And Ro lights 2 candles, and we all know who those candles are for.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Jackie Jr. I really like both of their performances throughout these scenes.
Yeah.
Because Rosalie's always been great too. I can't think of the actress's name offhand. I mean, Edie Falco's always great. But I like this push and pull because, I mean, they're obviously both going through something on this international trip, but Carm wants to really express it, but Ro wants to just have a vacation. And that's why I love that clip I used at the beginning, because Carm's trying to have this thought, this discussion on like, you know, life going on even when you're not around and when you're dead and stuff. And then she's like, let's take a picture. Like, you know, let's fucking, I mean, it all comes to a head in their dinner scene. But I really, I don't know. I really liked what they have going on here.
Yeah. And so then we have Tony getting the roadhead we mentioned. Vito calls him. Tony says to meet him at the mall. Yeah.
Are they doing a fake out? Are you supposed to think maybe he's going to have a anxiety attack? Because to me, it was just always clear he's probably getting blown here.
Yeah, it was very clear he's getting blown, but the way they shot it, it's like they want us to not get that, but you obviously do get that. So I'm like, it's a great question you're asking, because it feels like they're trying to trick us, but they're obviously also not going to trick us. So I don't know, Jim. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. And I mean, it is interesting because it is like Tony has made the call. Like, they are going to take out Vito. They got Carlo on it to do it. So like there wasn't like a question of like, was Tony still thinking about what they were going to do here? I mean, I know I'm jumping ahead, but it is interesting because where things go, where Phil ends up doing it and what it means for the Soprano family or crew, if you will, because he gets a call from him real quick and like makes the meeting at where's it going to be, at a diner, or they're going to meet somewhere or something, and that's kind of where the hit was supposed to go down at.
Yeah, and speaking of before we move on, before we forget, lest we forget, this one is going up on the counter. Show.
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah.
You know,
Let's do it.
So we got
Jim. That.
Oh, good.
No, I was just saying the same thing. Brings us to 65, and I suddenly realized we're gonna get to 69 deaths, and I can't wait to see who gets to get that one. But yeah, so it's Bobby, right? No, who comes in? Yeah, Bobby comes in and tells them all, and he's got a cool eye patch now, so that's good.
Yeah. I mean, is there anything else you want to say on this scene here? Like, you know, when he just gets jumped and beat, and you know, Phil comes out of the closet and all that good stuff.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I kind of feel like this was the inevitable end of Vito because of how much it's been built up. And I guess with that in mind, that's part of why I felt like the way they dealt with his character choices weren't as enlightened or enlightening as they might have been, because the obvious end for this character is this. So any choice they make to end up here, it's like if it has any whiff of sort of like, I've seen this before, or it doesn't, you know, it doesn't have that much nuance to it. Like, say, if his gay lover he finds in this idyllic paradise town is more of an archetype than you might expect. Like, there's nothing unexpected about that. It's kind of driven to 11 and it's a paradise town. Like, all these different factors we've talked about the last few episodes. Just the fact that we still end up here, it's like, I wouldn't say it cheapens it necessarily, but it's like, oh yeah, of course we ended up here. Like, what is the difference if we skip over those episodes if they didn't add that much to it other than just padding for time?
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I do agree that it does seem like maybe there could have been a better way to get there. Like, it does seem like they got Vito to almost like a salvation type place with this, idealized town, and then they couldn't figure out how to get him out of there. I guess, I mean, the main idea is going back to what we've talked about, where, one of David Chase's things is how people can't change or you can't escape. But it does seem like they could have had a better way to do it. But then again, what would have been better? Like someone, like tracking the last cell phone destination and then finding him, or, like, I guess I can't think of a better way to do it. It does just make sense that he's his own worst enemy in a weird way, and he kind of, not that he brings it upon himself, but he can't figure out a better way to live his life, and it spells his demise.
Yeah, I think as a concept, I have nothing against any of all of that, and especially with the show we're watching, it makes sense.
Yeah,
I just feel like maybe with the way some of those things piled up, like for example, like he has to drink and cry in the car on the drive back to New Jersey, and he crashes into someone and shoots him in the back and I kind of feel like it is so that we're permitted to feel okay about this, what happens, And again, it's not that bad. It's just I hold the Sopranos to such a high standard that I expect to be like amazed by everything that happens, and it just doesn't reach the pinnacle of other things that have been built to for an equal amount of time within the show. But with that said, like, obviously, by the end of the episode, we're like, oh, shit, this is significant on other levels, too. Things are going to happen as a result of this. Like, it all still adds up to me. I don't think it's bad necessarily, but it's also like some of it. And especially when you have scenes like, I like the scene with the watch when he's working and that, but it's like, it feels outside of the Sopranos universe to have that voiceover.
Sure.
And it just kind of felt... I don't know. I didn't hate it, but like this is where we end up. Gets a pool cue rammed up his rectum.
Yeah,
and,
I feel like that's valid criticism. I do think they do salvage it by having it happen at like the halfway point of this episode, and not like, typically that's the big climax, and it's like tune into the finale next week. But
yeah,
they are exploring what it means, because Bobby comes in, gets the news. He was beaten to death. They found a pool cue rammed up his ass. Chris says lover's quarrel, maybe, which is hilarious. But I like the reaction, because everyone's kind of like, oh yeah, I mean, we wanted this, didn't we? Wait, did we want this? And there is this kind of moment of like, huh? But then also compounded with the idea of this is, in a weird way, even more of a kind of stain on them as a crew and their rep, like even more so than just having someone in their crew that was gay, because it's like disrespect now, because there wasn't an okay or like approval or whatever it might be. And at the same time, it's the perfect opportunity to do that, because if Tony like outwardly fights back, whoa, what is he defending, a gay person now? So it is playing into the whole mafia dynamics, at least how we know it, when it comes to made guys and what you're supposed to do. I mean, even going back to like when Ralphie got punched by Tony, and that was kind of a big deal.
Well, everyone sort of also looks to Tony for his take on this, like how's he gonna play it, and he sort of plays it off like I was gonna do this anyway, but then to Sil he's like, this is fucking disrespectful and it's gonna fuck shit up and we need to do something. But I also want to point out that it's interesting how this parallels Tony Egg, because Phil Leotardo wanted to kill Tony Egg.
Yeah.
Of course, Tony took that death away from him, so Tony handled something that should have been given to Phil Leotardo, and now Phil Leotardo takes it back by handling Vito, because it's kind of the inverse situation here, and this time Johnny's not around to sort of set things right, so Phil just kind of does what he sees is his right to do here, as he would have done with Tony Egg, and we get to kind of see the consequences of what would have happened if Phil had done it, but, later with this guy.
Well, and especially timing wise, because Phil is basically becoming the New York boss.
Yeah.
And, it's almost like a slippery slope where he gets to get away with one thing and then he gets away with another thing, even going back to Phil and the vitamins and how that was already putting the writing on the wall that Phil was taking over. Never mind when Johnny did his allocution. So now it's just another little thing and they're going to keep taking it. And then what Patsy makes the comment like, oh, I wish I borrowed money from him. And then we have that other guy stirring the sauce, grins to himself like, genius move.
I love it. Yeah, so Tony, when Tony goes outside, he's like, you know what this is about, right? This isn't about Vito, it's about me.
Yeah, exactly.
And like he acts with everything.
Yeah, he's partially right, but yeah, it's also a very Tony's narcissism. Then he gets a call from Carm, and she's just talking about being in Paris. Oh, it's so great, and Tony is kind of preoccupied with some other things, so. I don't think he's actually interacting the best either. I don't make any notes on some of his comments, but I kind of remember him not being great either. Like if
he asks like how the French fries are.
Yeah,
like the French fries, and the French toast. Like lots of puns. She's not really in a pun mindset, so yeah.
Yeah. And then Tony's still kind of thinking about retaliation. And maybe Tony, you don't have to worry too much. Something might happen later on that even though you want retaliation, that you're not even planning on.
Yeah, and he's saying that like he wants to retaliate like somehow with the like hit a warehouse or whatever, like, and they're not gonna know, but they're kind of gonna know it was us. But no, it's like because he says like when some guy got hit, that went on for 7 years, and like when people are dead, they're not earning money or whatever. So. He doesn't know what to do, but like you said, it might not be up to him.
Yeah, he wants to hit him in the wallet where it counts. He wants to, get him do it financially, which is smart. Then we have Ro like flirting with a guy. She's again like just another kind of opposite to how Carm's looking at this trip. Rose living like she's taking her summer from college, backpacking through Europe, hooking up with Frenchmen, smoking in restaurants. But Carm's like, can we go to the museum now, please?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sort of talks about all the people who've lived there before, looks at a necklace saying, imagine a woman just like us wore this and they had a life, and they're looking at these ruins and generations after generations. It makes you think, let's take a picture.
Yeah, well, and it kind of reminded me, you and I personally were in a museum in London doing this same stuff, admiring
the same shit. That's true. I think almost word for word we said these things.
But yeah, there's some of the clip I played at the start of the show, and yeah, Carm's having this deep moment, and I like that it is tying in with Tony and who am I, where am I going, and it spreads over into, I mean, not to jump around a bit, but like to their scene later on when they're having dinner, and she's still kind of going into it of how like, it's just kind of like when you die, life goes on, it just keeps going, same as how Paris, things are just going on even though you're not there. But she just wants to push too far because she kind of brings up Jackie Jr., but she brings him up in a way of like she knows that they killed her son, like basically like Tony and their way of life. And it's weird, like we never talked about it, and
maybe don't.
Yeah, it's such a tough, because obviously Rosalie knows it too, and this scene like really like moved me emotionally, like the way she plays it, because what a way do you have to live your life where you kind of do know that your friends and family were involved with the death of your son. I mean, given he kind of did bring it upon himself, given your way of life, but he was still just a kid. But you still have to like smile and laugh, and that's your life. And Carmen I guess she's feeling the international, like, who am I? We're just waves in the ocean at this point. What does it all matter? Let's talk about how we killed your son, and maybe you'll forgive me for it.
Yeah, no, I see exactly what you mean. I feel that as well.
Yeah.
She kind of tries to bring all that up, but yeah, they're not in the same mindset, let's be honest. And I think that also is reflected later when she has the dream with Adriana, because that's the same thing but different, same but different, which is what happens in your dreams. You sort of pull up something and there's a parallel, and it's sort of not exactly connected, but like when there was this thing about the building inspector and Tony asks like, how far do you want this to go, and she's kind of got one foot in one world and one in another, and in France there's all these people and none of them are murderers, and I could be like here and like not be associated with murderers. Oh, so weird.
Yeah, it's a great use of the Adriana cameo, and yeah, it does tie in for sure with that opening dream where like Carm knows all these things, but she doesn't know them. It's, I guess, like what Tony was just talking about. They know, but they don't know. And you know, now that she's having what people have when they travel to new places, whether it be internationally or just even if you're here in the States, just a new state, just a place you've never been before. And you kind of start thinking about how big the world is, maybe how small you are, but not in a bad way, just in kind of like a wow existence. But to her, she also has to face some of these thoughts in the back of her head of these friends that are now dead because they didn't quite play mafia games properly. And, Sopranos, I've always I know we've gone back and forth on dream sequences, but I kind of like how they use them. And I think this is a good use here. And she's got Cosette as well, because as we know, Christopher sat on her and killed Cosette, but she's finally with her. And I think what the guard or someone's like, hey, someone tell that lady she's dead.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great dream sequence as well. Like, short. It's one of my favorite types.
Yeah.
So we have Phil Leotardo sitting around with Vito's wife and his sister, I guess. They're all talking about, yeah, I love them like a brother-in-law. Don't worry, I'll arrange the funeral. And Vito on some level probably knows it's better for the kids not to have that role model, and turn off that TV.
Yeah, he used to get mad because there are muscular men on TV.
Yeah, that was a dash of comedy where I didn't expect it, I guess. But
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, and we get to see a little bit more of Phil's wife, and she's still kind of playing up her part in all this. And yeah, he does. It is interesting how he says, "I loved him like a brother-in-law." Like, what does it even mean? Like that kind of means like you didn't really like him at all. I loved him like some guy I was forced to interact with.
So we have Tony. We actually skipped over a scene with AJ, or what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, and also because I forgot, because she breaks down like our tailor's going blind, and I guess wasn't she? She was talking about the tailor in their earlier scene, right? When they're talking about the slacks.
She was, yeah.
And it's just so funny that they're so like, I don't know, concerned about this guy.
Care more about the tailor and the slacks. Yeah, of course they do. But yeah, speaking of someone who doesn't have any clothes, AJ earlier was in his underwear giggling in a chat room, and I think we can all relate to this. We've all been this person, right? I mean, we're basically giggling in our, we wear clothes for this, but you don't know if I have anything on my bottom half. It's a video podcast. The webcam doesn't go that far down, so who knows? But anyway, we've all been this guy, right?
Yes, because it's just he's looking at a screen laughing, and you don't like. But I get his point of view, because you could be like someone saying the funniest stuff in that chat or whatever it might be, but Tony's reaction is fucking so perfect because he's so disgusted. Like he really like hates him at this point. He really hates this kid. I mean, he does say when he's with Melfi, like, I hate my son. He's kicking like a schoolgirl, and I want to smash his face in.
Yeah. No, that's the thing, because she's trying to talk, and like he brings that up, like about how he's wasting his time going back and forth with some other jerk off, which I feel I'm disappointed he didn't pick it for the intro of this episode, but it should be the intro for every episode we do, because we're just a couple of fucking jerk offs going back and forth, giggling like schoolgirls. So he wanted to smash his fucking face in, and he talks about how I think he like Carmilla protected AJ in the way that he wishes that his father that Livia protected him from his father, and all this stuff. So there's that conflict, because earlier in the episode he just wants to sleep, and now he has to actually think about it because Carmilla's not there to absorb it all. So he's just kind of like, I want him to be like a real man like me, but I don't want him to be like me because I hate me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, because he brings up, my father would be laughing that this is the son I have. But I mean, I've said it many times and I fully believe it is that, AJ is Tony. And yeah, and it all does come together with Melfi where she's like, yeah, you're blaming Carmilla for keeping him from from protecting him from you being like your dad and like smashing his face in when you think he didn't do something correctly, and that's what your mother didn't do for you. And like you'd mentioned in the last episode, it does feel like we're getting a little bit more substance and breakdown in some of these Melfi scenes, even though it doesn't always kind of get into Tony's head, but at least it does feel like they are breaking a little bit of ground here.
Yep. So we have the dinner scene in Paris where everything kind of comes to a head a little bit, like we already kind of went over.
Yep.
I'll skip directly to the next scene where this character, Fat something or other. They're all Fat something or other, aren't they?
Like Fat Dom or something, I think.
Fat Dom. So he comes in and he's talking shit, right? And they stab him. They kill him and they bash him and they stab him. So there you go. I didn't expect that.
You know what? Yeah, we do got to throw him up on the old counter.
Of course we do.
Number 66.
He just keeps going. Like, he could have got 1 or 2 cracks in, but he has to ask about, like, was it chalk, the pool cue? And, like, oh, was your lipstick on a napkin? No, wait, it was on his car.
Yeah.
It's not even good cracks. So, Silvio does actually hit him first. There's a lot of yelling involved. I think Silvio just wants to beat him up, but Carlos stabs him maybe, or I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's like, hey, we could talk about our family, but you don't do that. Or also, like, don't push it. And him making those cracks is kind of basically disrespecting them in general. Like saying, I can come into your place and do this because now we're with Phil and you guys are a joke. And, he learned real quick because, he gets cracked in the back of the head and stabbed a bunch of times.
Yeah.
Take that, motherfucker. And it's great because it's like, it does feel like, they're making dinner. Like, it seems like people are on their way or something. I guess Tony was on his way. I don't know if he was supposed to have dinner with them or what, but they have to hang out and wait for it to get dark out. So they're just playing cards with the dead body chilling.
Yep.
And then Tony shows up and Silvio's like, Tone, get back in your car.
You don't want to see this.
Yeah, you don't want to be here.
Yeah. Tony's rightly annoyed.
It is. They do have the hilarious, like, hey, should we just chop them up here? And it's like, no more of that.
DNA. Yeah, Tony just kind of leaves, gets in the car. We get to see it's still the same driver guy, the one he beat up like ages ago, is his driver. Seems to have recovered well, so that's all good. But I wonder if this is like, because he's in the car, and that's when he calls to sort of set up the thing for AJ. So I guess everything piling up, and you gotta love it when things come together, because I think seeing someone dead for no reason is a great way for him to go, no, actually, I don't want AJ to be like me, because he's gonna die.
Yeah.
He's gonna be like Fat Dom, and he's gonna die. So he comes home and takes AJ into the garage, and has a fucking great scene with him there.
Well, yeah, because AJ is just sitting there with his dipshit friend and some girl, and they make like the, it's supposed to be the roller. I've heard this joke, but as a roll, how do you tell your parents that you like rollerblading or no, what's like the worst part of like rollerblading? So I'm telling your parents you're gay, but they make it about skateboarding, which, come on, skateboarding's cool. But it also is, it's a perfect scene, like to go back to Tony being disgusted with him on the computer. It's also another scene I could see him just being disgusted. They're sitting there, they got like shit all over the table and they're playing video games, just wasting the time away. And he pulls him in the garage, starts telling him about this construction job he got him, and he's really laying down the law. AJ is trying to play his AJ game, where he's just like, look, I just think it'd be better if I'm looking every day, I'm looking for jobs. And Tony, shows him shit's real. He's gonna get rid of that car, then he's gonna get rid of his clothes, and he's gonna throw him out in the fucking street. And he smashes the windshield in with a football helmet.
Yeah, and weirdly, it's like one of the best parenting scenes from Tony, because AJ needs this. And when Tony says like "you're my son and I love you," it doesn't feel like he's saying that like "oh, I love you, but god damn it." He's like genuinely like, "No, look, I love you," and that doesn't seem like something that would be easy for him to say at all.
Yeah.
But he manages it, and I think it's true, and I don't think he could have done it without Melfi's help. So yay, go therapy.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
guess
yeah, that
he finds a balance because he's
yeah.
still kind of being like what his dad would be, and he's still kind of maybe being angry and violent but I guess it works. So it is AJ does need something because he is spoiled, and there aren't ever like repercussions for what he does, so he does have to show him that shit's real now.
Yeah, I mean, he tried to stab Junior. I don't remember there being many repercussions except like he yelled at him, slammed him against the car. But yeah, it's a great balance, and like in such contrast to Tony in the bathrobe, he just happens to be wearing this suit as well, which adds to his argument weirdly. It's just a really good scene, I think, and talking about how he's going to go to construction, and you know what, it's a good paying union job, and we're not going to charge you rent or nothing, but like you're going to go where I'm taking the car away and everything else. And yeah, I don't know that this is going to be a turning point for AJ because his habits are deeply ingrained, but maybe he'll have enough for those bottles of Cristal.
Yeah, at least for the short term, it's working. You know, and like Tony says, they're not going to charge him rent or anything. You keep what you pay, but you're gonna work. Yep. Then we had the scene we already talked about. It was Carm's dream where she sees Adriana and Cosette. Now this is in Paris as well. Yeah, it's right.
Yeah.
Now I do imagine when you write stuff like this, like even though I think it does make sense and it works, there has to be an element of like, fuck yeah, we get to go to Paris. Like, let's write Paris in there because then we get to go. Like, even so, you know, Drea De Matteo got to go to Paris to shoot this one scene. Good for her. That's awesome.
Yeah. I even felt earlier when they were in the taxi, I didn't know it was going to be so important to the episode, so I thought it might just be like green screen outside the window, like they're going to be in the cab, then in a hotel or whatever, but they're obviously in Paris. And I remembered that one scene from seasons and seasons ago when they're by St. Stephen's Green in Dublin, and I'm like, I live in Dublin. But they're just in a hotel room. They're clearly not there. And here they're so clearly there. So yeah, it's definitely a thing. And they definitely use it for all it's worth. They use the vistas and the trees and all of it. And again, they fit in another dreamy scene where they're leaving the hotel and Carmela's kind of looking around, looking up at another stone. Like what's with all the statues, Jim? Like I know you might not be on this part of the book yet, but I swear there's something about these statues in the Sopranos sessions.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I didn't read this chapter, but I guess it would be like dead people, right? It's kind of like, you know, it's because it's a frozen person in a way, and it I mean, it does represent history, and you are thinking about like, you know, this is X amount of years old and all the people that have lived here. So I mean, most things in Sopranos are about death, so it's not quite a leap for me to say that, but I think that's for sure an element.
That's definitely part of it. I feel like there's something more to it that I can't quite grasp, so do feel free to email us at showswhatyouknowshow@gmail.com if you have thoughts on the statues. But yeah, I feel like the rest of the episode kind of has a similarly semi-dreamy vibe, even though we're out of the dream, because we just have them coming home. We have Vito's kids reading the newspapers, finding out he's not a spy, and you know, AJ waking up, Carmela doing laundry, and like the photography guy at the end with the Thing Club. Those are a bunch of short scenes in succession there. Do you have thoughts on any of them?
Well, to back up a little bit, we do have a quick scene of just Phil staring at the ceiling, almost like a statue, I guess. He's not really moving, just in bed with his wife sleeping. And then, yeah, as you said, yeah, it's very kind of dreamlike. She kind of gets this last moment as they're leaving, but she kind of like wanders a little bit kind of around the street, kind of taking it all in. And yeah, statue. I'm just skimming through here as well. Well, I do like that there's this, you know, she comes home to Tony and it's not like a bad thing. Like not that there's anything bad there. It's just kind of like, oh, how's your trip? You know, it's great to be back. It's amazing. But I like the intercut with Rosalie has like a sweet moment with, I guess, her mom, and she's kind of happy to be back. It is pretty heartbreaking to see those poor kids reading about their father who was fucking bludgeoned and beaten to death, and I mean, essentially a hate crime, and also dealing with just recently seeing him and having him told that he's a spy. I guess you could almost still, like, if I was a young kid, I'd be like, oh, well, that's what they do to spies. Fuck, that's part of the dangers of being a spy. I don't really know what to read with the photographer thing. I mean, I guess it's just kind of like, I'll remember him. I don't know. Like, I knew this guy, and it's like I cut back to like the premiere when we did see Vito finally with his big weight loss, but I don't really know what to read. It does make a great last shot because Sopranos is always very good with the cuts or fades to black. Happy Vito, who just met his untimely demise.
Yeah, I think it's a great last shot too. Even if I'm like these last scenes kind of blend together a little bit for me. Like I said, a bit of a dreamy vibe. And Carmella's back, and usually she'd come back, and it would be like, oh, real life shit. That's genuinely what happens after most times you go away. But she seems okay with it. Just talks about the jet lag and does some laundry. So I guess we'll have to wait and see how this impacts her in the long run, or if it does even at all. So yeah, we're almost done with this part of the season. It feels like it's going to escalate from here. That's my guess. And I guess we'll have to wait and see if The Sopranos delivers a massive gang war or what. Because they like to build that up and then go like, nah, we're gonna do an episode about something totally different. So I look forward to seeing what's in the last episode of this season next week, or this part of the season.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, as we had mentioned, you can send your thoughts, or whether it be agreement, disagreement, or stuff we missed, to showswhatyouknow@gmail.com. Of course, at showswhatyouknow.com, you can find our other discussions, including our show called Blank Meets Blank, where we get the tables turned on us. We like to critique other people's TV shows. We make our own. We pull things out of a hat, show how easy it is to be done. So you can find that there. I think it's a lot of fun. And if there's, also review the show, please. Review the Shows That feed, and also review the Sopranos feed, the Cut to Black feed. Greatly helps us. Much appreciated.
Very much appreciated, yes. And before we wrap up, I think we have just one more thing, Jim.
Oh, what's that?
Cut to black.
And we're out.